So now, based on those convictions, and really on some of those clear scriptural descriptions, not just convictions, but clear scriptural descriptions of who we are in Jesus, having been reborn of the Holy Spirit, that ought to really inform what we do as we try to help one another come to complete sanctification. This is not our process. This is not our training. We're not a track coach trying to help someone run a 4:30 mile rather than a 4:45 mile based on all of our human input. This is us being in awe of the fact that the Holy Spirit is helping that person go from a metaphorical 4:45 mile to a 4-minute mile. And as much as possible, we want to align ourselves with the very work that the Holy Spirit is doing. And so, as we look at this effective toolbox for discipleship through sanctified discipling, here's a process that... Oh, we're not rolling here. Here's a process that we call the Paideia cycle. Are we not? Oh, somebody pushed that over. Yep. You just put it up. There you go. And there's nothing really particularly revolutionary about this. As a matter of fact, as you see it, you'll probably recognize it in how it is that you've been trained in any manner of speaking. You would have, if you were a disciple being discipled by a rabbi, this is what would have been normal course over and over again. Again, it's probably no different of how you're taught in school, how you're trained in a better instrument, how you're trained in sports, how you're trained as a kid to have better manners. It's the same basic coaching cycle that exists across all of these bounds. And it's more than available to every one of us at any time. And we probably do employ it even in our own attempt at personal spiritual growth in a lot of different ways. But I don't think we employ it that much as we're really trying to have an ongoing discipling relationship that is intentional, deliberate, helping someone come to that place of Christ being formed in them. And so as we look at this process model that we'll put out here for us, it begins with the idea of planning and instructing as one who is a disciple trying to help someone that you're discipling. So we can call this mentor and disciple just to kind of keep it all straight rather than have a bunch of terms that sound too similar. So if you're the mentor, you begin with this idea of where do we want to go? What is it that you want to see happen in your continual walk with Christ? And it may be that the first time you're doing this, it's just getting a lot of input and a lot of good listening. Or it may be that you already know along the way, and you've come prepared to be able to have this bigger meeting with them and be able to have a real teaching that's going to help them now down a path of continual improvement as you're able to add to their faith knowledge, their knowledge goodness, their goodness self-control, etc., as you see in passages like 2 Peter 1, 5 through 7. Well, anyway, moving on from here, as we look at this cycle, after having kind of sat down and planned what it is that you want to do, well, then you would do it. However, the big difference between, let's say, a school teacher teaching you geometry and you going home and doing the homework is that in discipleship, there's a much bigger component in which we do this together. I think we've lost this, by the way. I know I have. I've become, kind of too administrative, or maybe I give advice and then I see how it went, rather than being quick to not just give the advice, but even think, hey, we can do this together. Yeah. How terrific would that be? And for sure, it's exactly the way that Jesus went about his discipleship. So, again, after the plan, then there is the actual doing of it. And after having done it, you see how you did. You inspect what it was. You look at what you did and you think, was I consistent? Was I intense? What did I learn? What would I do differently? What's the takeaway? And that's basically what you do when you inspect. And then having inspected, you then adjust. And overall, from adjust, you'd think that, well, then you go back to plan. And we actually are setting this up a little bit differently in that you'll actually head over to do, and have kind of an internal cycle here. And the idea of the plan meeting is more like a summit meeting that you'd have maybe once a quarter or every maybe 6 weeks or so. But it wouldn't be something that happens every single time you get together for a discipleship time. It's just the practicalities of life, but it's also the practicalities that having been kind of engaged or taught or charged with a new stretch to your character, trying to help you to be more like Christ. And as an example, in the Hampton Roads Church, we've taken on some of the characteristics of Christ. We want to be shaped into the image of Christ. And so we look at, how can I have the faith of Christ, the submission of Christ, the humility of Christ, the holiness of Christ as examples. And after having had a kind of a big, serious teaching on that and a charge on that, well, then it'll probably be more than a few weeks where you're really trying to put this into practice. And where having been taught, then you go about and think, all right, I'm really going to practice this holiness. I'm going to watch the way I joke, prayerfully. I'm going to watch what I allow my eyes to see. I'm going to really be set apart. I'm going to recognize the fact that I've been sanctified by the Holy Spirit. I'm going to remain aware about all of these things. Let's see how it goes after having walked in that, knowing I have a special purpose. I am holy, that I don't walk into social situations without realizing I'm consecrated, I'm holy, I'm meant to be God's special chosen instrument in these situations. How does that go? And afterwards, after a week or so, maybe I write in a journal, or I just think through how those things went. I get back together with my mentor, and we talk about how it went. And then after that, then we'll talk about, well, how do we adjust so that we continually keep going in a great direction? Even if I've taken a step back, how do we then take 2 steps forward in the adjustment? But after the adjustment, you're not going to go back to plan again and have another summit meeting on this. We've already done a pretty good job, probably, of establishing the teaching of holiness of Christ. We've done a good job of that. We don't have to do that every single week that we get together, or every single meeting if it's not weekly, if it's fortnightly, or whatever it is for you guys. That's every 2 weeks. Then really, this becomes the meeting where you gain input, you gain insight, you gain even some sort of a collaborative charge of where it is that you'll go as you stay in a continuous improvement loop. And just by the way, this cycle here is used by all coaches. It's also known in some quarters in business as the Deming cycle of continuous improvement. It's the basis of Kaizen that revolutionized all of Japan in post-World War II. But the interesting thing is that anybody who's used this cycle has often looked at its most effectiveness, and its kind of most famous effectiveness was in the Jesuit and the Calvinist movements of the 1600s. Because both of those movements then went on to dominate the landscape of Catholicism and Reformed theology, respectively. And what was it that they did in their discipling? They simply practiced this. They actually practiced it based on 1 Timothy 4:15, looking at the way that Paul discipled Timothy. In 1 Timothy 4:15, Paul said, devote yourself to these matters, give yourself wholeheartedly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. And this idea of continual progress was brought about by that kind of awareness and intensity and feedback that comes when you really do when you devote yourself to these matters, you give yourself wholeheartedly to them, and you make sure that you're able to see your progress along the way. And again, who here has been coached in a sport that had time trials of any sort associated with them? Right? Now, if your hand is up, did you have some sort of a variation of this that your coach would give you? Right? You're gonna run these drills for a week, and then we're gonna try another time trial and see how we do. And let's check and see if that's working. If it is, well, great. Even if it is, then let's see if we can't do something more to have the next breakthrough along the way. I mean, every football team tries to add to their plays. Team sport, you name it, and everything that you do as you're being educated is this. We call it the Paideia cycle because Paideia is just education. It is the education of someone who's young to be able to help them come to a place of greater and greater mastery. And in this case, for us, it's greater and greater mastery, so to speak, of being able to walk in the very steps of Jesus. Even Jesus, when he sent his guys out, he sent them out with careful instruction. They came back, they told them how it went, And as a result of that, Jesus was able to then give them more instruction when they were sent out another time, but also to be able to give them a focus of rejoicing, not that you did all these things, but that your names are written in heaven. You know, to add another layer to why it is that we do what we do. And so it is a very helpful improvement cycle that helps us to improve, I believe, in alignment with the very work of the Holy Spirit. And what we'll do is try to take a deeper look at each of the components here for just a moment.